Brother Gorshin here is from 1988 and was, as far as I'm aware, sculpted by Mark Copplestone. He's named after Frank Gorshin, who played the Riddler in the 1960s Batman TV show, as that was the style at the time, but the real riddle, and the reason we've decided to feature this mini is, what weapon is he holding? Now, you may say it's a needle gun, and you'd be right because that's what it is, but for whatever reason I have, over the years, been asked to identify this mini's weapon more than any other weapon on any other mini. So yes, I would like to state, for the record and for all and sundry to hear, this is, indeed, a needle gun.
Here we have a tiny little epic scale Chaos Dreadnought from 1991, released in the Epic Stompers box, which came with, well, a little bit of everything, really. You may recognise this design from the Chaos Dreadnought in the board game Space Crusade, although some have drawn a connection between this design and the modern Deredio. A connection made somewhat muddier since when this Chaos Dread design was in use, the Deredio was already around. It was just a name for a particular build of standard Dreadnought. But then, when has anything about 40k not been a little bit more convoluted than is absolutely necessary? What was I talking about? Oh yes, the little Dreadnought. It's adorable, isn't it?
This 1995 Eversaw Assassin mini is neat because it's one of those minis that make you go, yeah, this right here, that's Warhammer 40,000. And I think this version does that much better than the later one, honestly. I attempted to paint this one in such a way as to evoke the edition it was released in, 2nd edition. I wondered why bronze and dark blue with dark green and red accents were what I thought of when I thought of 2nd edition, but then I realised it's probably just because the first box of Marines I ever bought had 2nd edition Night Lords on the cover. Kinda shocked I didn't go the whole hog and put him on a goblin green base too.
Space Marine Terminators are fascinating from a design perspective, because after a few false starts, they nailed the design 2 years into 40k's history, and every subsequent version of them has just been upscaling and making small refinements to the same design. This particular Terminator, sculpted by Jez Goodwin, is from the 1989 RTB9 box, and although there are quirks that tell you it's specifically one of those and not a later version, the most obvious being the arms, weapons, and the deepness of the back vents, the only major change this design has seen is that they've gotten bigger. In all directions.
As it's Christmas, let's take a look at an RTLE Christmas Marine, released in 1987 and sculpted by Bob Naismith. Now, you may ask what makes this a Christmas Marine as opposed to a normal Space Marine, and the answer is that if you paint him like he's Santa and paint the arrow on his shoulder as a Christmas tree, then he looks kinda festive. He was sold with a fellow drunken companion, though both were renamed to simply Spaced Out Marines later, showing how surface level any Christmas decoration really was. This mini is a little unusual since he doesn't have any elbow pads, although he and his friend might be the first Marines to ever bear an arrow on their shoulder pad like a tactical Marine. This particular one is used as a tactical sergeant and as such has had a bolt pistol added to his hand, and his festive origin is commemorated by some personal heraldry of a snowflake and a drop of eggnog.
This is Tal's Spellsinger from 1988 and is another mini sculpted by Jez Goodwin. This curious Eldar holds the title of musician. His instrument? A hand flamer and a sword? Okay, in reality, I'm fairly sure his instrument is the fungal growth-looking thing on his back. Some type of elaborate wind instrument, I assume, given it feeds into cables going into his helmet. Eldar bagpipes, maybe? Whatever it is, I assume it would be an absolute bastard to tune.
This Iron Warrior is one of the multi-part plastic Marines released in 1996, and is slightly different to most multi-part plastic Marines since the body and head are one piece, which did limit how you posed them, but they were the first mainline plastic Chaos Marines, so I'll cut them some slack. The Space Crusade ones weren't mainline, don't start. This particular example is one of the very first 40k minis I ever bought, although this is not its original paint scheme, it was stripped and repainted much later. Originally, I'd painted it as an odd hybrid of Black Legion and Night Lords since I got them before I'd ever actually read a rulebook and I didn't really understand what a Legion was. Or that thinning your paints down is a thing.
This is a teeny tiny epic scale Imperial Knight originally released in 1994 in the Titan Legions box set, which was part of the second edition of Epic. which wasn't actually called Epic properly yet, but we do have a whole video about that particular nonsense if you'd like to learn more. These knights were a simple 3-part plastic mini. Well, a 4-part if you count the base, I suppose, made up of a body and 2 vaguely posable arms. They're a little goofy by modern standards, I guess, but you can absolutely see the design elements that would be refined into the modern knight design. Although, since they're about the size of any normal 40k mini of the time, sometimes it's hard to think of them as being a huge war machine and not just a little guy.
This is a 1985 fighting fantasy fearless dwarf, and as such is part of the first range of plastic minis Citadel ever released. It's also very large, totally out of scale with everything else that Citadel was making at the time. This one has been slightly modified to put it on a more conventional base, as well as having the hand rotated so that it could actually hold its shield properly. Although I was able to save the original sticker that was on said shield, because yeah, part of the line was they all had a sticker on their shield. Do I recommend that you get one of these to paint up? No! Absolutely not. These minis were made from some of the most unpleasant plastic possible. Bad mould lines, hard to work with, doesn't take glue or paint very well. It's just a real pain in the arse to do absolutely anything with it. Only recommended for the most deranged of collectors.
Here we have a Rontherd from 1990, sculpted by Kev Adams. As many Citadel minis from the 90s would be, this is a hybrid of plastic and metal. In this case, the only plastic, barring the base, was the arm and whatever weapon you should choose to put on it. He's sporting the rare Mohawk and chin strap combo, which one must assume required a very careful cultivation of hair squigs. Interestingly, if you were to run it as a Rontherd in the modern game, then I suppose logic would force you to consider his megaphone a melee weapon. And to be fair, the hole is just painted on, so it's solid metal. It would f***ing hurt if you were hit with it.